All right, jumping right into this video, going over the first mistake I see a lot of players are making is in relation to fishing with Jolthog. Now, one thing players are told early is you should fish with Jolthog. It'll save you an astronomical amount of time instead of having to fish. You'll get some pals for it. Now, keep in mind this is still the case, but there's a few caveats that come with it that are almost never mentioned. The first is you're limited to the amount of pals that you can actually fish out. Generally speaking, you'll only see about 3 of the same type of pals. You may occasionally run into something every once in a while that's outside of these 3, but generally speaking, you actually eliminate a massive pool of actual pals that you can get when you go about this method. Now, the second thing, and arguably the most important, is you actually mess yourself up from getting some of the best passives. If you didn't know, whenever you fish this way, you actually eliminate the possibility of getting the rainbow traits. So let's say, for example, you're a new player who's been conditioned to just go use the Jolthog thing, and you find a purple or a golden, fishing spot later on into the game, and you use this. What you effectively do is eliminate the possibility of getting some of the rainbow traits that you otherwise wouldn't have gotten. So yeah, the first mistake players are making is you're using the Jolthog fishing method a little bit too much in the late game, be it because you weren't given the information in its totality, or you just trying to save time. Just do the fishing naturally and you'll get a lot more reward from it. All right, for our next tip, it is the Multiclimate undershirt that I noticed almost no one is using, or a good portion of players are not using. And what this accessory does is it gives you heat resistance as well as cold resistance level 3. And just looking at the cost, is high quality cloth, flame organs, ice organs, and polymer. Very easy things that any player can get access to. A very good portion of you are probably exploring right now, actively going to the colder and the heat zones. You probably keep multiple armor sets on you, and in a lot of cases, while that is effective for now, having this just alleviates that. And you can go into fights where you're properly prepared with actual defense and health, which you can prioritize more when you're not forced to use, resistance specific armors. So I'm going to show you where you can find it because there is a direct recipe. So this is the main area. You're going to make your way all the way up here to this place called the PIDF Tower Entrance. This is the level 41 in the desert. I'm just going to zoom out real quick here, just so you know. And then roughly right about here, it's like 600, 308. You should see it on screen now. There's a tower here that you need to go do. Go ahead and fly over to the tower and just be careful in the area. There's going to be, I believe, like 3 stones that you need to break with your pickaxe or your laser tool if you're at this point where you have it. And within this tower, there will be this schematic that you need to pick up. I would say, generally speaking, and this technically could be a third mistake players are making, make sure you're always doing these towers if you haven't done them. They actually have some really valuable resources and amazing accessories tied to them, just like this one. All right, for my next tip, this is going to be centered around Coralum as well as Chromite. First with Chromite. Chromite is a very valuable resource that's going to be utilized to make Exolite. This is going to be something you need to get progression, to make exotic pal balls, and just generally just going to need a lot of this to progress forward. One thing about this resource in Coralum is you can't really farm these naturally like you do a lot of the other ores. They are not tied to like resource nodes in the traditional way. You can't like craft like ancient technology that can give you the ability to get these. You have to find them in the overworld, and in my opinion, slightly annoying ways. I'm going to show you how to get both of these much easier. For the Chromite, what you're looking to do is come over here to the Fae Islands, and specifically around the top northern part of it, you'll notice these pals called Smokies. Now on my server, we have the rates up a little bit higher because, there's a lot of us here. But one thing about these pals is when you actually take them down, they have the ability to drop Chromite as a just general drop resource. Now, obviously, when you see these guys, you want to take them down as much as possible, but I would also highly recommend that you capture a few because they actually come with an extremely solid passive. And what that passive is Dig, Smoky Dig, and what it does is it gives you the ability to detect nearby Chromite, and also when it's fighting with you, you'll get 100% more when you're, using it. Now, rather than using the annoying metal detector method, simply make your way to the Shield Dragon tunnel located here, which you can see. And inside this area will be a cave that you can actually go through. Now, in this cave, there will be a pal boss that you need to take down, which you should probably capture and, take down. But within this cave, when you use Smokey, he will actually detect these veins where you can actually farm Chromite. It is a teleport that is extremely close to this tunnel, the Shield Dragon tunnel. And so you can just come here every once in a while when it resets and just get the Chromite done, where you don't have to go around using the metal detector. I think that's super annoying. And this is a much more efficient method where you can save some time and just easily get it done. Just make sure you have the proper drill for it and you will be done with the Chromite here extremely fast. Now for the Coralum ore, this one's a little bit more tricky, as naturally you're supposed to fish for this, which I once again think is a little bit of an annoying method to do, but the method I currently use takes me all the way up here to the Isles of the Glacial Core. Just to zoom out a little bit so you can see where it's at. This is the main hub area, I guess, and then over here where Nepotilius is, this is where you need to go. And when you're on this island, you will notice that there's these huge whale guys that kind of spawn here, and these guys once again has it in their drop pool. Now I generally wait till around nighttime to do this because they will generally like group up together and fall asleep together. I just take my beacon, he's a lightning pal, he does good AoE damage, and I will just zap them all in like a one burst and just get all of them to drop it. Now personally I think this is going to be way more effective because you generally don't need that much of this ore to progress to the next tier, because I would just rush past this tier. If I'm being honest, I would just level up past this tier. For my next mistake that we need to go over is players are just simply not using the condenser as they should. Now, I know just from personal experience that I don't like utilizing the condenser too much until I have the PAL that I think is the most valuable for me. But one thing to keep in mind is there are still some extremely valuable talents, even if you don't have the perfect PAL, that can give you like really good benefits. For example, my Fingerlope Lux has the ability to, whenever he's in my party, water pals drop 60% more items, and when I fully upgrade this, I believe this goes up to 80%. So those whales, for example, I was trying to farm for the Coralum or whatever it's called, I would actually get 80% more if I had a full maxed out Fingerlope. Yeah, I won't have the best Fingerlope, he may not have the perfect stats, but it's gonna make this like tier much easier to get through because I have these passive leveled up. So generally speaking, make sure you're using the condenser. It is a really good tool to use even relatively early or mid-game-ish because it just brings you a lot of value. Kind of piggybacking off of our last example, pals have the abilities that have the 40% more item increase when they're defeated are plentiful, and you should generally be using those when you're farming. Catchers, for example, have the ability to do that with neutrals. Pin King does this with fire-based pals. Cryolinx does this with dragon pals, and so on and so forth. I will put down in the description a list of the pals that I've found so far that has talents related to this, where you can actively get extra benefits from having them in your party. I would highly recommend just having them extra so that whenever you do find something that you need to farm that you can't get in base, you can just do it with them. Another big mistake players are not taking advantage of is utilizing weak point boosters. Now, from what I can tell, since their 1.0 update, they added a lot of pals that have the ability to have weak spot bonuses whenever you're doing specific like elemental types to them. So for example, this Corjero Noct has 25% increased damage whenever you're doing weak points against dark enemies, and I think you can actually get this up to 80. Marturtical Terra has 80% phase for some reason whenever he does it to ground. Pin King Lux has 25% for pals that are water related, and Finsider Ignis has it 25% to fire damage, so on and so forth. I think you guys get the idea. Whenever you're doing any form of combat or aiming to do like any of like the raid bosses or whatever, make sure you have the pals that have these weak point bonuses because it just gives you the extra, you know, benefits. For my final mistake I see a lot of players making is related to the supply drops as well as the meteorite drops. Now, depending on the region that you're in and depending on your server settings is going to determine the rarity of the drops that you get, as well as the interval in which these drops drop. Now, one thing to keep in mind about this is if you do not clear them or people on your server do not clear them, they will never leave, and these locations will just have these useless drops that's just kind of sitting there, and people who are in the higher tier zones very likely won't see any good drops because they're kind of locked into them just kind of sitting there in those other zones. Generally, I would highly recommend after your early game you want to build towards the higher tier zones and try to get the supply drops in those regions. Not only do the supply drops provide you with some really valuable things like books that can be used to upgrade your pals, it also can give you spheres, which are actually pretty high tier. In the region I'm sitting right now, they have the possibility of dropping soul spheres as well as the ancient ones. And that is super valuable because right now I'm still incapable of crafting those reliably, and this is such a massive boost to letting me actually catch pals that are a little bit higher. For the meteorite specifically, there are also pals that are specific to those drops that you can only get from doing the meteorite stuff, and the meteorite itself actually is pretty valuable too. So having the supply drops and the meteorites being actively farmed are actually pretty valuable. This kind of takes me to another point that's kind of important. We recently did a video on the channel where we went over the best early game locations that you as a player should be aiming for. But once you start to transition past that mid game point and start moving towards the end game, I would highly recommend that you start building in these higher tier zones, either in the world tree or you build over in the Fey Islands or even the floating islands. These locations generally yield way better results. And when you take a look at my base where I'm located, I'm actually not too far from a supply drop location. That's why you see a lot of the footage of this is just repetitive of the same location, is because I live fairly close to one. I have a high tier zone with a lot of really good valuable resources, and I have these supply drops giving me spheres, so I don't have to waste materials. So yeah, long story short, make sure you're actively taking these supply drops. They can be valuable depending on the zone that you're in and you're getting them from. And there you have it, guys. Those are some mistakes I still see a lot of players making in Palworld. I know a lot of you are still in the early game. You're starting to transition into that mid and late game. I want to make sure that you guys have all the right information and you're not making these mistakes, because it's going to just make your progression in the game way smoother. Now, keep in mind, if there are some tips that you can give players, or even me, for example, that could actually help them that I didn't mention in this video, leave them down in the comments because it helps everyone out. Also, if you do appreciate the work that goes into these guys that are very quick and to the point, that try to be respectful of your time, consider leave me a like, drop a comment, or even subscribe to the channel. Subscribing actually helps the channel in a very big way as a small growing YouTuber, so really would appreciate that. As always, guys, my name is Fervor. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next Palworld video very soon.